Okay, so first I'm like a week, well, 2 weeks late, so I apologize for that. So we're gonna we're gonna jump right into this. So episode 6 was called The Impossible Box for Star Trek Picard. And that episode was actually a pretty damn good episode, only because it dealt more with Picard and the fact that he knew the location where Soji was, meaning she was on the Borg artifact, meaning he had to pretty much go on the Borg artifact and pretty much deal with his demons. And in the very beginning of the episode, there's, a scene between him and Agnes, and she's pretty much telling him, what happened to Maddox, which pretty much she's lying through her fucking teeth, which is hilarious because you could tell she's trying so hard to like keep it together, but she just forces out a lie, and Picard eats it up, and he's like, whatever. And so she mentions the artifact and the Borg and all that, and they said, she mentioned his name, Locutus, and all that stuff, and she said, well, maybe with the artifact and this new program and treaty, maybe the Borg have gotten nicer. And Picard has a moment where he's like nice, and he pretty much says the Borg aren't nice. The Borg assimilate, planets within hours. He's like, they're not nice. And so he goes into his ready room, which looks like the chateau, and he asked the computer to look up three things, which was the treaty, the Borg, and the artifact. And as he sits there in his chair, he starts looking at pictures, which were pretty cool because they were for certain TNG episodes. So they were pictures from like Borg, which had Hugh when he was assimilated, and then they had a picture of him after all. He has all the Borg parts off of what he looks like currently. And then they had a picture of Picard in the Locutus, which was from the Best of Both Worlds. And the really cool camera angle that was really epic was, you see the younger him as he's Locutus, and then it pans away and you can see Picard's old face as if it was transitioned, if he was still Locutus, and what he would look like if he was still Locutus older, which was pretty damn cool. I was like, whoa. So you jump onto the Borg artifact, and Soji's pretty much trying to figure out, why she's having certain nightmares. And Narek decides, I'm going to help her out, and takes her to this really cool room that Romulans go to pretty much think and process. And it's called like an open door, which you kind of walk through your dreams, that if you get stuck, it's kind of like you open one door to see something that you just can't get past. So in her dream, it's always raining. It's a thunderstorm, and she's walking through, she's clutching her stuffed animal, and she walks into her dad's like I don't even know, like a little room where he's got like orchids and stuff like that, where he's like pretty much growing really cool plants. And she kind of walks around the corner, but her dad always stops her at this one pivotal moment. And so Narek kind of walks her through to the point where he's like, hey, when you get to this point, he's like, I don't want you to freak out. I want you to walk through. Which eventually she sees herself as like a wood, like kind of like Pinocchio-esque, kind of like woodness, but with just a torso, head and torso. So she freaks out and all this other shit. But before all that, she does some math, because she figures out, something's not right. So in her room, she's looking at pictures and stuff, and she's got this really cool detector where she highlights the picture, and it says 37 months. So that means she's only 37 months old. So she's putting two and two together that she may not be what she thinks she is, which is human. She may be a synthetic. So with that, Narek kind of helps her out. She comes to Narek and like goes, I had another nightmare, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, what, I'm going to help you out. And does that whole thing. And in the process, she, once she finds out a torso, he tells her in her dream sequence while she's doing that to look up. He's like, what do you see? She said, I see 2 planets that look like blood. And he's like, oh, okay. Which means she found her home world, meaning Narek, now the Romulans and Tashiar, now know where the synthetics are, like they're pretty much their home base. And so with that, he leaves her, locks her in the room, and does this really cool thing with his puzzle box that eventually opens, and it's the gas that was pretty much in the very beginning of Star Trek Insurrection, when they had this really cool device that opened up and like it looked like a flower, and it just kind of puffed up in the air and like killed everybody. But she's activated, so she was able to rip through this steel and fucking jump through. In the midst of everything, Picard eventually gets on board. You know, Rafi has to do some really, really fucking ass kissing to a friend to get some clearance, you know, and so they get the clearance. He's on board, meets up with Hugh. He has a moment where he's on the Borg cube and he's freaking out because it's just it's too real for him, and it looks like he's gonna fall, and some of the XBs, the ex Borg, grab him, and he freaks out, and he's like, get rid of him, and he hears Hugh's voice, he's like, they don't want you to fall. And so he sees Hugh, and they have a big hug, and he's like, look at you, what are you doing here? And he's like, I'm here to see, you know, Soji, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, is she in trouble? And he's like, yes. And he's like, I had a feeling. And so it's a race to get to Soji. So it's like you pretty much have the Tashiar, Nark, and his sister looking for her on the Borg cube, and you also have Picard and Hugh looking for her. So it's one of those where who gets to her first, and she happens to drop in the floor where Picard and Hugh are talking, and he's like, Picard's like, you gotta come with me. He's like, I get you out. He's like, I know your sister, I know your father. He's like, you gotta trust me. And so she finally kind of pulls back, but she kind of comes to terms and says, fuck it, and goes with him. And they're making their way to the Borg, to the Queen cell. And it's kind of ironic because Picard's never been in there, and he said, we're in the Queen cell, and he's like, and Hugh tells him, he's like, it's funny that you've never been here, but you know where you are. Because he's still, you forget, he's still connected to all this. You know, he still has Borg implants, so he's still connected in the hive mind some way or the other, so it kind of connects, so you kind of go, oh yeah, makes sense. So Hugh does some really cool shit and opens up this badass like escape hatch that the Queen had just in case shit went south and she needed to get the fuck out. He opens that, and in the midst of all that, the Tal Shiar catch up to him, and you find out Eleanor was supposed to stay put, didn't, found his way onto the ship. I still don't know how. They didn't cover that. And starts whipping the shreds to fucking Romulans, and tells Picard and Soji and Hugh to get out. So Picard convinces Soji to go. And so in the midst of all this, he uses his comm signal, and he's like, hey, he's like, we need to set up a rendezvous. And Rafi's like, what do you mean? He's like, there's no time. He's like, set a course for Nepethe. And he's like, do you know the place? And Rios is like, yeah, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, all right, that ended that. So Soji and him go through the portal. Hugh and Eleanor are defending themselves. So that pretty much is how episode 6 ended. Now, this current one, Nepethe, the newest one, is where the last one picks up right where the last one left off, where Picard and Soji end up on Nepethe, and they start walking this path, and they run into a little girl. It's like Wild Girl of the Woods. She speaks like this little 1 out of like 13 like languages, and they start talking and all that stuff, and he's like, I'm here to see an old friend, blah 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 blah. So they eventually keep walking, and they find out, the little girl guesses that Soji's a synthetic, so she freaks out, and Picard has to go, no, it's okay. He's like, you're just finding this out, it's okay. And so she kind of like lets her guard down a little bit, but not a lot. And the little girl runs up to this really kick-ass, beautiful house I don't want to say it's in the woods, but it's kind of in the woods-esque, but it's really picturesque. And she screams for her mom, screams for her dad, and you see that her mom is Counselor Troy. And then, Troy makes her appearance and says hello, and they have a big heart-to-heart moment, and she says, what's wrong? She senses, you forget, because you forget for a moment, she's an empath, so she pretty much senses that he's sick and he's running out of time, and so they have a heart-to-heart kind of, no words, but it was really beautiful between the exchange of eyes and body language. And he pretty much tells her, he's like, he's okay, he pretty much has made his peace, and he's okay with what he's doing, and he's okay with that he's dying. And so she meets Soji and, reads her and gets, of course, nothing because she's a synthetic, so of course she's not going to get anything. And in the midst of all that, you see the little girl call out, Dad, and he's like, and you see Riker in the kitchen grinding up some Parmesan for a pizza, listening to jazz, which was awesome to hear. And he's like, what's going on? And he like freaks out, and she's like, Jean-Luc Picard's here. And he's like, wait, what? And he opens the door. He's like, say it again. And you see Picard in his kitchen. He's like, hey, Will. They have an exchange of hugs, and he's like, what's wrong? And as soon as he figured out something was wrong, the dude puts up his house like Fort fucking Knox, like shields, everything, indicators, all that shit. Which is crazy, but, it's Riker. It's number one, so, and he pretty much goes, okay, what's wrong? And Picard's like, nothing I can't handle, da-da-da-da-da, I don't want you to get involved, blah, 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 and he's like, fine, so be it. And Troy ends up taking Picard because she's like, you need to rest, and so she takes him into their son's room. Thaddeus Riker, who passed away due to a disease that if the synthetics were still able to function, would have saved their son's life. But since the synthetic banned, they moved into Pethe because the soil had some rejuvenating power. So they figured, hey, if we move here, he might have a chance, and he didn't, and he passed away. So he would have been 18. And so they kind of have a moment, and, Troy's like, every day, it gets a little better, but, it's still there. And there's a wall with a bunch of writing, and it's the language that Thaddeus created. He created like 13 different 13 different languages, which is amazing. And so you see him cut to Soji, and the little girl is Riker's daughter. And Riker's daughter pretty much says, hey, your dad, aka Data, wanted to be pretty much what you are. And she's like, how do you mean? And she's like, he wanted to have flesh and blood, and also so that he wanted to learn how to dance. He wanted to do this. And it pretty much broke down his whole thing throughout TNG. It's like she pretty much broke down what the things that he wanted to do that he did accomplish, but wanted to feel as a human, like tell jokes and ballroom dance and all this other things, like feel love and all that. And she's just not buying it at that point in time. And so, there's still, this was like a really big, the whole episode was just a conversation. There was no action in it. I mean, there's a little bit because on Rios' ship, as they're trying to get to Nepethe, they're stuck in the Borg tractor beam because they feel that Soji and Picard are on the ship, and they're not. And so they let go. The Borg tractor beam lets go, and so they freaking set a course and haul ass. But what they don't know is that Narek is in a ship behind them. And what you don't know, really, is that in the very beginning of the episode, you see Alison Pill's character, Agnes, sitting, which would have been episode 3, I believe, where she was sitting at the base with her headphones on, and that Romulan chick, showed up with her fucking Ray-Bans. She did a mind melt and showed her what was going to happen, which was a bunch of synthetics, destroying a fucking planet, destroying the shit out of things. And she said, we need you to infiltrate, we need you to go into space, and set her on the mission to go with Picard and find Soji. And they made her bite this fucking tracking device and ingest it in her system. So you see her take it, and then you fast forward to her, and you see her, she's starting to freak the fuck out because she now knows they're so close to getting Soji, and she doesn't know what to fucking do. And so they're doing their thing and all this shit. And so, Rafi decides, because Allison Pill's freaking out. So she's like, come with me, I'm going to, make you feel good. So she gets her a big ass piece of red velvet and all that shit. And so they're talking, and she ends up like throwing up, which she threw up the tracking device, which Narc lost pretty much them. So he lost them. So back on the Pethe, you have Soji with Troy and their daughter in the tomato fields, and she hasn't tried tomato before, so she makes her try a tomato, and it's, she has her first experience and all that. And Picard's he's having a heart-to-heart with Riker, trying to figure out his next move. And Riker, pretty much he's like, just don't talk, just listen. And he pretty much breaks down what's going on. He was like, I know that head tilt, because she did a Data-esque head tilt, and Riker knew right then and there, that's Data's kid. And he's like, and so he broke it down to Picard, and Picard couldn't say anything, so he's like, I knew it. He was like, what are you doing? He was like, Jesus. And he's like, Picard's like, I don't know. And so Troy, has a heart-to-heart because Soji ends up pushing him, they go, because he's trying to, like, tell her, it's okay, blah, 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 and she's just like, fuck you, and hits him, and Riker's like, hey, and Troy pretty much tells Picard, you had it coming, like, this is what you've asked for, pretty much, like, you're fucking around with Romulans, you're fucking around with this, and she's like, you had it coming, she's like, you need to pretty much work your plan out, and the only way that she knew he could work a plan out is if at dinner, he treated the dinner table as the ready room. So you fast forward to dinner, and they're sitting there eating pizza, and he's going pretty much treating like Riker was number one, and Troy was Counselor Troy, going, options, what do I have? This is what I have, blah, 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 blah. It's like, if I can't get a hold of Rios, I need an attack of a ship, and if I can't get a ship, what else do I do? And we need to find the planet, and Soji finally opens up and says, this is what happened. So she pretty much breaks down what she had to do last episode to get Narg the location to where her homeworld is. And so now Picard knows, he's like, okay, now it's a race against time between us and them to get there. So eventually he gets in contact with Rios towards the end of the episode, and they're getting ready to bounce out, and you forget Eleanor was still stuck on the Borg cube, and you see him, just kind of like in the shadows, and you see the chip that 7 of 9 gave Picard and said, if you ever need me, flashes. So you see him grab it, and he hits it. So pretty much next episode, 7 of 9 is coming back to rescue Eleanor, and then you think they're probably going to meet up with Picard in this next episode to make it a really badass showdown between Picard's crew and the Tal Shiar. But this last episode of Peth, it was actually really good. It was awesome to see the three of them, number one, Counselor Troy, all kind of in the same room, making the same body language and movements and stuff like that. The storyline was there's a lot of talking. I mean, there wasn't any information except for, just old TNG references, which was good, but it kind of got to the point towards the end of the episode where they kind of shoved it down your throat a little bit, but it's okay. But this next episode looks pretty good where, shit's gonna go down, and I don't know. I mean, they ended up killing Hugh in this last episode. This bitch, the Romulan bitch, killed him. So that's 2 important characters gone. I mean, 3 important characters. I mean, you still have Data, and then you have E-Chip, and now we have Hugh. So maybe 7 of 9 days are numbered. That would fucking suck, but whatever. So that is my review. I mean, both episodes were pretty good. They were solid 5s. They weren't like the best of the best, but they were okay. So yeah, like, share, subscribe, because we are close to 100 subs. So, let's get the word out. All right, everybody have a great day.